Scientists are makers, and the tools they use for research and experimentation often don't come off the shelf. Join my friends Kishore Hari and Indre as they visit the labs and workshops where scientists engineer custom tools and technologies to better understand our world. This is Science in Progress.
One of the things that has always fascinated me is how octopuses' nervous systems work.
It is. I've actually been reading this whole book on it, Other Minds, that goes into the history, the genetic history of sentience. It's riveting. And a couple of years ago, the Academy tweeted that octopuses need stimulation, that they actually live longer if they have puzzles to solve.
Wow, amazing.
So I asked them if I could actually build a puzzle.
Oh my God, did you do that?
Well, yeah, so I did. I built this puzzle.
Whoa.
This is 2 years ago now that I did this. I actually couldn't remember until they handed it back to me this morning what this looked like. Like I had actually forgotten what it was. But yeah, this was my puzzle for an octopus to solve. It's a simple arrow with a lever, and they would put food in here, a treat that the octopus could see.
Okay,
and the idea is that the octopus would move this and be able to get to the treat.
So how did you decide to build this design, for one thing?
Well, they made it really clear that there couldn't be any sharp edges.
Okay.
And we didn't want to make something that the octopus could pinch itself in.
Okay.
And so I thought specifically I wanted a lever action. I wanted the idea of an octopus doing something that doesn't happen in the natural world, activating a lever to achieve something.
Oh, right, cool.
Right? So this is my lever. It is effectively, there's a circle with a tube and another circle on the underside, and you would put the treat inside this little chamber, and it's visible. So the octopus can see that there's something it wants in there. It just has to figure out what to do to take this orange and move it to this hole in order to get to the treat.
But octopuses are really strong. Do you think like they might break the lever?
I made it out of a bunch of half-inch acrylic specifically to make it hard to break. And there's also very little places it can get to work against itself. So I feel confident that this could survive an octopus attack. That's what you asked me. Can this survive an octopus attack? Which is the coolest metric I've ever imagined for a build.
And so why didn't the octopus 2 years ago do it?
That one died.
You didn't get it done soon enough.
This is the other thing about the octopuses is that they don't live very long. Even the longest lived ones live like 4 or 5 years.
Wow, that's surprising because they seem like they get really huge and really smart.
No, they get smart fast and then they go.
Wow.
Maybe they go run an alien culture that we don't know about.
Well, there's a new octopus now, and she's young, and I think we need to get this to her as fast as possible.
Yeah, let's totally do it.
Okay.
But before we introduce the puzzle to the octopus, I wanted to get to know a little bit more about cephalopod intelligence in general. So I spoke to Rich Ross. He's a senior biologist at the Steinhardt Aquarium, and he's published a bunch of academic papers on octopuses. And he has a passion for bringing science to the public, notably with his Skeptical Reef Keeping series. Here's Rich telling us what a cephalopod actually is.
Cephalopod is an animal that has all of its limbs arranged in a circle around its mouth.
Huh, that's the definition?
That's pretty much it. Cephalopod means head, foot, so their head and feet are connected.
So like jellyfish?
Not a cephalopod.
Okay. Squid?
A cephalopod.
Octopus?
Cephalopod.
Nautilus?
Cephalopod.
Okay, what am I missing? What's the other big category?
Cuttlefish.
Cuttlefish. Okay, right. So, in this arrangement, there's also a difference in terms of how their nervous systems work. So, what do we know about, sort of in general, the nervous system of cephalopods?
Well, we know they're pretty complex. So their brains are shaped like a donut, and their esophagus goes right through the middle of the brain. So that's a really interesting fact. So it seems very important that they eat the right size food, or the right size food goes down their esophagus. And then they have, at least in octopus, they have like distributed ganglia in their arms. So it's kind of like they've got this main brain and then these kind of sub-brains that allow the arms to do these kind of semi-autonomous programs. So it looks like the arms will do things like kind of mindlessly searching for food. And then when something interesting comes in contact with those arms or those limbs, the main brain kind of says, oh, what's going on there? And then they'll pay more attention to it.
So there's been a lot of interest in octopus intelligence in particular, and I think part of it is like, you know, those eyes look soulful. You know, that we project our own, emotions into those eyes.
Sure we do.
Is there any evidence that octopuses feel emotions?
Emotions is going to be the hardest one to answer. Because how do you even define an emotion in something that can't talk to you?
Right.
So clearly they get upset. Clearly they get upset. That's the right word. I was going to say clearly they get angry, but that's the emotional word to upset. But are they ever really happy?
Right.
Or are they just content? Or are they just?
Yeah, so that's the question. Are they conscious?
It's hard to tell.
Right.
It's really hard to tell.
Yeah.
They do some things that make it seem like they may be.
Like what?
How's that for a hedge?
That sounds great.
They do some things that make it seem like they may be conscious. They seem to have preferences, which is
like individual animals.
Individual animals. They also will learn things. Like it's been shown that they can differentiate between people.
Oh, okay.
And the way they do that is emotionally, or it seems emotionally. I have to keep saying seems. Even I fall into it, and I'm usually the anthropomorphic dream crusher. But there was a study done where somebody would come in and feed the octopus, dressed in the same. They kind of looked the same. Somebody else would come in with a prickly brush and kind of prickle near the octopus. And very quickly, the octopus learned when the person who was going to feed it would come in, they would come to the front of the tank and be more interested. And when the prickly brush-wielding person would come in, they would stay to the back and not be as involved. So that seems to be able to tell, that feels like it's more than just a stimulus response.
Right. And it does it sound like what they're doing is using visual cues? Like how good is their eyesight?
That was all visual. Their eyesight's really good.
It is. Okay.
So that was all visual cues because the people would come in without the food or without the brush. So it was kind of like as soon as the octopus saw, they would know something. And sometimes, and about their vision is really good. Sometimes when we have new octopuses back a house, there's not much stimulus going around, and then the octopus, when they put it up, we put it on display, can get freaked out, for want of a better word. That transition is weird. So sometimes we show them video on an iPad. We just keep that running all the time.
Wait.
Yeah.
Screens for octopuses?
Yeah, for sure. So I was trying to show them video of things with people, so they watched a lot of debates, like a lot of Christopher Hitchens debates, actually, because why wouldn't an octopus like that?
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
And did they maintain their attention onto the video?
They do maintain their attention to the video. They get used to it.
Okay.
So then I would change to a movie and show them Big Trouble in Little China or something like that. And anything I could think of that had lots of people, because that's the view they're going to get.
Got it. And
so yeah, they get used to it, and then you change it up and give them something else to watch.
And that is so that when they have lots of people staring at them, they don't freak out.
Right. Exactly.
So what happens if they freak out? Like, what's their behavior?
They can tend to hide, and in a public aquarium, that's suboptimal.
Right.
You want them not hiding, so we do everything we can to keep them gregarious and engaged. I mean,
So-
they're cryptic by nature, right? A lot of the octopuses are, and the ones we try to display are the less cryptic ones, and we do all kinds of things to try to keep them engaged and out. And we call it enrichment. So we're giving them food in a wiffle ball, so they have to interact with the wiffle ball to pull the food out. It's way too easy just to feed the animal and then it goes and does nothing because it's already been fed and has nothing interesting going on. So keeping it interested in its surroundings is something we really try to do.
And is that so that it will continue to, interact with you, or is there any evidence that an octopus can get bored?
Bored is another one of those words.
Yeah.
It's hard to tell. Is it bored or is it sated?
Right.
So we try to keep it engaged, and they seem to often be more engaged when we're engaging them with puzzle-like objects.
Okay. I see.
At the same time, it's very food-oriented. So an octopus will check out something to see if it's food or if it's got food in it, and if it doesn't have either of those things, it'll just let it go.
Yeah, like if you gave it a Rubik's Cube, it wouldn't continue to play with it.
Not so much, but if you give it a Rubik's Cube slathered in shrimp juice, it'll play with it for much longer.
Got it. That's really interesting, because I think a lot of us think of, just eventually playing for the sake of playing itself, not for the end goal of having food. And I always thought that octopuses yes, maybe you first shape them to like a particular toy with food inside, but ultimately they would just play with it anyway, but it sounds like that's not the case.
They may. There's some really tantalizing stories out there, about the octopus. There's one about an octopus that was essentially playing ball. It had a ball in its tank, and it would move the ball to a jet of water, and it would go away and then come back, and they'd keep doing that. What I can't find out about that story is how long did that last? So it's a great short bite, but my guess is it didn't last very long, a day or so. Or octopuses shooting jets of water at a light. Is that because they were just annoyed with the light for some reason, or is it from some other reason? So, yeah, they tend to start ignoring things if you leave them in the tank with them too long.
I mean, this sounds like a really difficult question to answer, my apologies, but how different is the behavior then in the aquarium compared to out in the wild? Because, an octopus who got used to the food around it in the wild is in trouble.
Right.
Right?
Right.
And is that because it's always moving around and the environment's changing and,
In the wild, the environment is always changing, and they're all always moving around, and they're all always hunting for food, but they're also making sure that they don't get eaten, right? So an octopus is a delicious package of all meat. You can eat all of it except for the beak. So there's no bones to worry about or anything. They're just all this meat, which is a great chunk of energy for any kind of animal that's going to eat it. So everything wants to eat them. So they're always looking out for predators. They don't have that in an aquarium. So very quickly they seem to learn that there's nothing going to come hurt them when they're in an aquarium.
Really? Do they explore the whole tank?
You put an octopus in the first time, and they explore everything.
And they know there's no shark around here, so...
Well, they figure that out pretty quickly, and then they'll be nervous for a little while. Every time the lid opens, they go, what's that? Or when you reach in to do whatever maintenance has to be done, or when people come and knock on the tank. But, it's only a short amount of time before they learn that there's nothing that follows that up. So there's no actual danger that comes behind them. So they tend to relax, or I'm anthropomorphizing again, but they tend to not be hiding as much for certain species. Now, if they get too bored, then they just kind of sit there. But again, are they getting bored, or do they have enough food? And are they trained to know that when we feed them food in a puzzle, that's when they're getting food, and there's no reason for them to do anything else the rest of the time?
Right.
If you knew you were getting fed every day at the same time from some hand from above,
right.
And there's an interesting video world going outside of people passing by.
Yeah. Well, that's why communism collapsed, right?
That's exactly why it collapsed.
So I want to talk a little bit about how they change color and
Sure.
how that's related to their nervous system, because that's really interesting to me. So tell us about chromatophores.
Chromatophores are these great cells that are controlled directly from the brain of the octopus, and they
From the donut part.
From the donut part.
Okay.
And they expand and contract, allowing the pigment to change, so it'll become more dense or more diffuse. When you startle an octopus, it does a display, and that's its brain going, controlling those things to deal with a threat display. Or one of the best examples is in a squid, or I've seen it in octopus as well, where they've got a potential mate on one side of them and a potential threat, being another octopus or whatever, on the other side, or me in one case, on the other side. On the side facing the potential mate, they'll be completely bilateral, different colors on each side, right? So on this side, it's very nice, I like you colors, and on this side, it's very, I don't trust you, this is more of a threat display color. There's been some research in cuttles from above where they put them on different patterns, and they can learn, one of them got an X, was able to put an X on it.
Wow.
So I think they can take in their surroundings and try to fit into them.
And is that related to the distributed nervous system? I mean, it seems like, is that, I mean, the fact that, yes, maybe the centralized brain says now it's time to change, but do the individual arms or tentacles,
I would assume so, because that would make the most sense.
Yeah, but we don't know.
But we don't know. And how much control can the octopus put on the limbs all the way through? Or does it get filtered to the ganglia nodes and then it kind of goes down? Not really sure. Something I'd be remiss in pointing out, or not pointing out, would be that octopus and a lot of cephalopods can change the texture of their skin as well.
Wow.
So that goes into the camouflage. So
like they can go bumpy to smooth?
Yeah, or even have protuberances that stick out, fleshy
Whoa.
protuberances that stick out. So they can get, it's not just the color of their skin that allows them to fit in with their surroundings, but it's also the texture. It's very cool. When we were collecting some octopus for display, it was very important that the person who spotted the octopus put their finger up and pointed at it and then didn't look away. So there was a team of 4 of us, and if you would look around every once in a while to see if somebody was doing this. Because if you do this and then go, then it's gone.
So interesting.
You might not be able to spot it again.
Wow.
Even if it hasn't moved, you might not be able to spot it again. So they're really good at the camouflage.
So another question I have is, how do you, if you're in an aquarium, get the octopus?
There's a couple ways to get octopus. One is commercially. You can buy them.
Like on Amazon?
Like as pets. As Amazon, I don't think has them on Amazon, but you can order them online.
Wow.
The aquarium, the hobby aquarium world's pretty big, and there's a lot of different sources. But you know, it's a two-sided thing for me with octopuses in the hobby world, because they do take some kind of specific care. So, you know, random people buying them as their first pet, as their first aquarium pet, is a bad idea.
Yeah, especially if we're talking about how smart they are. It seems like, you know, you can't. There are regulations against owning a chimpanzee.
Right. And they can escape. So if someone just buys it because they're cute, they haven't done what needs to be done to be able to keep it contained. So I do what I can to kind of get information out there. Also, with some of the more photogenic octopuses, like the Wonderpuss, like, you know, or
whoa.
that's a Wonderpuss. It's called Wonderpuss photogenicus. That's its actual name because it's so photographable.
Wow.
When they first started hitting the commercial market, me and some other people really tried to dissuade people from getting them because we didn't really know how to keep them. We don't know what their wild populations are like. So we don't want people just going out there and over collecting them, you know, to have them last. And also, when you get a cephalopod collected from the wild, odds are it's not young, so you may only have a couple of months with it. To make it really worthwhile, you have to be a nut like me to want to keep these in your home and want to invest in keeping them.
So wait, you have cephalopods in your home?
I do.
Really? What does your wife think about that?
My wife kind of, if my wife loves it.
I would think so.
She likes to say she's got a mad scientist that lives in some room over in some side of the house. She actually stops me from taking some stuff down. So when I get into a lull and I talk about breaking things down and not having to deal with it anymore, she goes, no, because then something will show up and then you'll be scrambling to set it all up together.
What about the romance?
What about the romance?
Yeah,
it's pretty awesome.
I mean, but is it like, is it just a male and a female and you're done, or is there mood lighting?
There's always mood lighting, because why wouldn't there be mood lighting?
Right.
It depends on the animal. So cuddles, you can keep males and females together. So they just end up mating every day, and that's much easier. Octopuses, except for like the larger Pacific striped octopus, this tattoo, and a couple other species that seem to be coming out, they don't cohabitate very well, and what that means is they eat each other, which is the worst kind of romance.
Yeah.
I think we can definitively say that that's bad romance.
Yeah.
So you can't really keep them together. So if you want to mate them, you have to put them together and keep an eye on them and make sure and watch for them to start doing any of the behaviors that lead down the road. So they can strangle each other, they can eat each other. So you watch them mating, and when it looks like it's getting too intense, you separate them. Or when the mating's over, you separate them. Is one of the ways to go.
So in your garage setup, do you do any cephalopod breeding?
I do.
Can we come over?
Yeah.
Awesome.
No, I'll ask my wife.
Okay.
So now that I had a better sense of cephalopods in general, I wanted to get specific. What about this new octopus that's at the aquarium? So to learn more about her, I talked to Margarita Upton. She's a senior biologist who actually works most closely with the Giant Pacific Octopus.
Tell me a little bit about this GPO. When did you get her? And I mean, it's a she, right?
It is a she, yes.
So let's start there. How do you know it's a she?
Well, you can tell by their arms. The right number 3 arm will have suckers all the way to the end on a female, and on a male it will have the male organ at the end of that arm.
So this GPO arrived at your doorstep in a big barrel, and then what did you do?
Well, we open it up, we acclimate it to equalize the water that it was shipped in versus the water in the exhibit, make sure it's the right salinity, make sure it's the right temperature, all that good stuff. Once we do that, then we'll introduce it into the aquarium.
Okay. And she was replacing a previous GPO.
Yes.
What happened to that one?
That was a male GPO, and he basically lived out his life.
Okay.
Yeah, they have a relatively short lifespan. So I had that male for a few years, and we just lost him.
And how did you, like, is this too morbid? Like, did he float up to the surface? How did you know?
They'll sink.
They sink?
Yes.
Aw, yeah, sounds very sad.
It can be.
And the reason I think it's sad is because it seems to me that these GPOs can sort of have a bit of a personality. They differ from one from another. Is that true, or is that myth?
Well, they do have individual characteristics to each animal. So I guess you can describe it as, a varying personality, just like any other animal might.
So what is this GPO's distinguishing characteristics?
This GPO doesn't seem to mind a lot of people around. She will come up to where she stations and interact without moving away. And she doesn't seem very shy.
So it's obviously a very different environment for her now to go from wherever she was off the coast of British Columbia, I suppose, to an enclosed space. So what are some of the things that you do to make that transition easier for her, or or does she care?
Well, I don't know if she cares, but what we try to do is mimic the natural environment as much as possible, light-wise, temperature-wise, and we try to introduce enrichment items, so to keep her stimulated and interested in getting food. And
yeah, so that's what we're going to do today. We're going to give her a new puzzle to learn. What are some of the other kinds of enrichment items that you provide for her?
Pretty much anything I can think of. I'll make ice cubes in different shapes or sizes with different flavors or textures or different pieces of food. They tend to respond favorably to those. I will give them little rubber toys that you would give a dog per se, where she can get food out of that.
Okay. Like a Kong?
I do have Kong toys, yeah. And the more intricate, the better. What else? I can give her jars where they can learn to unscrew the lid.
Wow.
Hamster balls.
And what is her process of learning? I mean, do you have to kind of shape her behavior the way you might a dog who's being trained to do a particular trick, or is there is it close enough to her natural behavior where she would solve it anyway?
A little of both. I do shape the behavior by introducing something that's a little bit easier. Say if I were to introduce a jar, I would first introduce it without any lid, or the lid just barely screwed on, and then I'll tighten that over time, and then she'll realize to unscrew it. Yeah.
And she's motivated by the food inside.
Absolutely.
So that's another question I have is, she's in an aquarium with other fish. They can't go anywhere. So why doesn't she eat them?
She would much rather get food from me. It's a lot easier, and she knows where to go, and it's routine. And those fish that are in with her are relatively large, and they know to stay away.
And is it like, do her muscles waste away because she's not, as active in an aquarium, or actually is she just as active as she would be in the wild?
I would say she's just as active. I think it's hunger that drives them when they're hungry. If they've gone through a recent growth spurt, they tend to be more active. If they're not, they're just going to hang out at home in their den.
So we have this puzzle, and Adam built it with an octopus in mind. So once you give, how would this particular puzzle be introduced?
This puzzle has a sliding mechanism, so I'm going to introduce it to her halfway open so she knows where the food is and to be able to work it incrementally that way. And then the next time I introduce it to her, I will slide it a little bit more closed and so on until she can open it all the way.
So your protocol will be like over the next week, once a day or once every 2 days, you'll sort of give her the puzzle and remind her of it and see if she plays with it?
Yeah, she eats every other day, so I will introduce it to her then, or I can introduce it to her with just a tiny bit of food just to familiarize her with it and just so she can work on it.
And finally, we were ready to introduce the puzzle. Margarita took me to the back of the tank, and then she spent some time slapping the water to signal to the octopus that it was time to play. Once the octopus came up, it was really cool to be able to touch her. It's like this kind of slimy, smooth, but incredibly strong tentacle. And man, once those suckers attach themselves to you, it's pretty hard to get them off. So Margarita put a little bit of food into the puzzle, and then she left it open so that the octopus would know that there's food there and be motivated to play with the puzzle. Over the course of a couple of weeks, she would introduce the puzzle to the octopus every couple days and see if the octopus would learn how to solve the puzzle all on her own.